Hey everybody, welcome back. We are doing another sample section today. This is, again, a way of me trying to clear the 200 or so Kindle samples that I have sitting on my iPad. And I keep getting more. Just yesterday I stumbled across one of those Twitter threads that are like, hey, I need some recommendations. Please assume I've read all the normal stuff. And I tacked on another 20. Help me! Anyway, so our big old random list of samples today gave me this one. This is Malice by John Gwynne. So, first impressions. Never judge a book by its cover, blah, 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 blah. But first impressions. We have, it's clearly fantasy. We have a sword. We have what seems to be kind of ghostly armies sort of in the background a little bit. That's kind of interesting there, right? The sword has a wolf pommel head. Makes me think of Game of Thrones for what are probably obvious reasons, but that's what it makes me think of. It also has a big old blurb right there in the middle of the cover by someone named Con Igulden, who I do not know. Don't know who that person is, but Mr. Igulden says, hell of a debut, highly recommended. I'm of two minds about this. Two minds. Number one, it's great that Gwynne, or at the very least Gwynne's publishers, found someone to say something really positive about the book. On the other hand, putting the blurb right there on the front. Blurbs on the back, I get, right? You're in the bookstore, you pick up the book, you look at the back of the book, there's blurbs. But a blurb right on the front, I don't know, there's something that feels a wee bit disingenuous about that to me. I don't know. If you're in publishing and you want to shed some light on this and why a publisher might choose to put a blurb on the front cover as opposed to the back cover, please let me know. I would love to know, because I have no idea. I'm not in publishing. But there's something about it that seems a little bit disingenuous, sort of like the publisher is saying, hey, look at me, look, I have a blurb, somebody else likes it already. Hey. All right, but again, that is first impressions, and that's it. So I'm going to take a read through the sample, I'll take some notes, and then I'll come back and tell you what I thought, all right? Hang in there. Okay, so this book, there's a lot to discuss. First of all, starts with a map. I think I've mentioned in at least one other one of these that if it's a fantasy book with a map at the beginning, you're in good hands. It also starts with an epigraph from Milton, from Paradise Lost. Now, Mr. Gwynne, that's ballsy. Gutsy. Let's not be gender specific here. That's gutsy to be invoking John Milton, Paradise Lost, one of the great epic poems of all time. But hey, if you think it works for you, I'd say go for it. And the what's interesting is the line is, for whence but from the author of all ill could spring so deep a malice. All right, so we have our title right there. Congratulations. Title in the epigraph doesn't usually happen. And I think it's interesting. It's, again, invoking a very, very famous poem. The author of all ill feels like Satan, classically. Big character in the story. And, title drop. So, okay, all right, I'm with you. You're taking some big shots here, and we'll see where we go. Now, it begins with a prologue, and I remember there was some discourse on Twitter. Twitter's where all the weird stuff happens, about prologues and people who like prologues and who don't. And I'm fine with prologues. I got nothing wrong with that, because it sets up sort of what this whole story is about. Usually that's what prologues do. And this begins with a guy named Evnus, who is going to ally himself with, number one, a foreign queen, right? He works for his own king, and he's going to betray his king. Why? Mostly, apparently, to spite his older brother. And he's betraying his king to a foreign queen and to, apparently, an evil god. As you do. It was very Macbethy. That whole prologue was very, very Macbethy, right? King goes into the woods, there's a witch, there's a cauldron, there's all sorts of weird stuff happening, betrayal and ambition and all that. So it was very Macbethy. As a fan of Shakespeare, I'm on board there. There's a sort of a bit of a cosmology. There's a good god, there's an evil god, there was a battle that nearly destroyed the world, there's an other world where the gods live. So this is not just a book about kings and kingdoms and power struggles and stuff like that. Right away we know that there's going to be supernatural involvement to one degree or another. So that is great. Then we get finally into chapter 1, and we are introduced to a complex system of people and families and friends. Our point of view characters change from chapter to chapter, which is always fine. I've seen that before. We've got a young boy named Corbin who is 14 years old. He's 14 years old, but he's very childlike. Like his mom is yelling at him for kind of playing in the dirt when we first see him. So that's a bit childish for 14 years old, but what are you going to do? There's a big royal wedding. There's lots of people to remember, even so many that I started making little family tree diagrams of people and how they are related. This is in the sample. So I'm getting a feeling that we're probably going to have a fairly large ensemble cast here. But yeah, Corbin, of course, is a kid. He is a child who is coming of age to some degree. He gets some friends. There's a secondary plot about a guy who becomes a servant of another king. There's several kingdoms going on there. Corbin eventually gets a vision. He goes into the woods. He is visited by something. He saves this wolf from a tar pit. He's visited by something. Evnis, interestingly enough, for having betrayed his king in the prologue, which is some like a decade or so before the action begins, is still not really a man of power. He's sort of inching his way up. It's one of those soul-selling things, I guess. But I think it's a good start. I think as a book goes, it's a good start. There are, like I said, a lot of characters, and there's a lot of political intrigue, which I'm fine with political intrigue. That's always good. I know that political intrigue can be a bit ham-fisted. It's can be tough to pull off. Martin, of course, did it well. I'm watching Shogun on Disney right now, and Clavel did a very nice job with political intrigue in his story. But I know, again, it can be a bit difficult. I know Jordan in Wheel of Time tried to do a lot of political intrigue, and to me, it just felt it didn't feel quite right when I read that. It's not one of my favorite aspects of the series. Your mileage may vary. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's got a lot of characters, all this politics, and of course just a hint, just a smidge of the fantastic about it, right? These gods and strange things that don't seem to be everywhere. We don't have people firing off magic and spells, but we do know that there are kind of ethereal or magical or otherworldly creatures that are involved in this world somehow, and we don't really know how they are yet. Sure. There's also a lot of themes of, and again, even in the Kindle sample, themes of becoming, right? People who want to become something else or better, right? Corbin wants to become a fighter. There's a whole thing about him finally getting a proper practice sword, right? A wooden sword with lead in the middle so he can practice and be a fighter. There's this guy, Verades, who wants to be a leader. That's really, really what he wants. And he's got, his brother who is not a bad person, but who overshadows him greatly because his brother's greatly charismatic and everybody loves him. But Verades really wants to be a leader, and we see him starting to take on that mantle. And then, of course, Evnis, who wants to be king, who has ambitions that are driven largely by spite and jealousy and greed. And so, yeah, that seems to be there's a lot of becoming happening in here. If I were to try to figure out where this is going to go, there's any number of places this can go. It's a fantasy novel. So I suspect that Corbin, being our first point of view character, is going to be very important throughout the whole series. I strongly suspect that, in the very beginning of this book, we have a royal wedding. We have a community brought together by this celebration. I strongly suspect something awful is going to happen, but I always suspect that something awful is going to happen in fantasy books, because it usually does. And I think that there's going to be intrigue, there's going to be betrayal, and at some point, the gods are going to have to get involved. The good gods and the evil gods are going to start sticking their finger in where they don't belong. And is it possible that, Evnis, for example, is going to regret his betrayal? Maybe. Is it possible that Corbin's strange visitor in the woods is going to ask him to do things that he should not have to do? Maybe. Gods are difficult to understand. If Gwynne does this the way maybe I would like him to do this, he would make the gods maybe really hard to understand. The gods have... this is kind of my favorite way that gods tend to be written in stories, is that gods have perspectives and ambitions that are not clear to us. And when we try to filter what we think the gods want through our expectations and through our experiences, it never quite works out, because we have human level experience, we have human level perspective. If you are a divinity of some kind, you don't have that. You have a very different point of view on the world. So it would be great if in this story, these good gods and evil gods are not quite that. There's something else. They're running on a different axis of morality than what the stories that humans have been telling each other. So who knows? We shall see. Would I buy this book and read it? Sure. It's got all the ingredients of stuff that I like. It's got some, like I said, politics, fantasy. It's got a big cast. It's got a map at the beginning. A map at the beginning, people. Come on. So, yeah, I think this is something I would put on my buy list. Sure. When am I going to get to it? Who knows? My life is largely unpredictable. Actually, no, that's wrong. My life is horrifyingly predictable. What's unpredictable is what book I'm going to read next. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Malice by John Gwynne. If you've read the book and you would like to chime in and tell us what your experiences were, please let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And I think that's it. So thank you very much for stopping by, and we will see you again for the next sample. Have a good one.